Hello, bowling fans. This is Dustin J. Markowitz coming to you, taped, as always, from the gem along the Colorado River, Laughlin, Nevada, bringing you another rendition of Bowling Evolved. Joining me, as always, is my co-host and one of the most famous left-handers in PBA history, and the left-handed thing comes in very handy here later in the show. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Eric Forkel. Eric, thank you for joining me tonight.
Dustin, pleasure to be here. How much do I got to pay you for that intro? I like it. I like the intro.
Hey, that's what we're here for, you know. Well, the truth is, you are one of the best left-handers in PBA history. I mean, there's only been, 37 millionaires in the history of the PBA?
That's correct. I happen to be a member of that club. That would be correct. That is correct.
So, you know, I mean, I can't see any reason not to, tell the truth. I mean, 5 national titles is nothing to sneeze at, so.
I agree. I'm with you. I hear you. I'll go with that.
Well, before we get the show started, I just want to give a big thank you to all of our listeners so far. We've had over 50 likes on our Facebook page here in less than a week, which is just incredible. People have been talking about the show. So, guys, thank you very much for getting this off the ground. Remember, we're definitely open to hearing everything you have to say. So, again, check out our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/bowlingevolved, or email us at bowlingevolved@gmail.com. Again, we'd be happy to answer any and all questions you do have. And considering questions, we are going to go off of the topic we started in on at the end of last week's show, and one that I know Eric has a very interested following now with is the bowling sport or game, why or why not. So far, I don't think anyone's tried to fist fight you yet, Eric, so I think that's a good thing, right?
No, they don't know where I live, so I'm safe.
Pretty interesting comments on our Facebook page and a couple of the emails. I'm just going to go over briefly a few of them.
Okay.
Now, Eric, as we talked about last week, you're still of the belief that bowling is a game, correct?
Well, I think it's a game for some of the reasons what we talked about, because of the playing surface and the control of someone basically being in charge of the lanes and being able to manipulate the lanes in all different ways. I guess the fact that they can manipulate it maybe for some people makes it a sport because that creates this large challenge, but I think at times it's just too much manipulation, and I think that has something to do with some of the reasons why maybe it hasn't gotten into the Olympics or something like that. Maybe they feel that doesn't classify it as a sport. I don't know, besides all the other political reasons. But, I mean, there's times where I think it's a sport, but most of the time I just think it's a very challenging game, you know, and I'm taking that stance for now. I'm sure I'll get crushed on it, but that's okay.
Well, we did have a few comments, and I'm just going to briefly go over what we had here on our Facebook page. First comment came from Doug Barker, who wrote in sport. In fact, the highest levels. I guess he's trying to say one of the toughest of the highest levels of sports requires hand-eye coordination at a very high degree, requires stamina and strength, strategy, and in team play, even defense. Just like golf, it can be used as an activity, but at the competitive levels, it's a very tough and unforgiving sport. He followed that up by saying that he was amazed, saying that golf is not a sport, American football is not a sport. I believe he's referring to the Olympic comments, since neither one of those are in the Olympics. Mm-hmm. But riding a horse and cheerleading and dance have seemingly become a sport. He says the Oxford Dictionary defines a sport as an activity involving physical exertion and skill, especially one regulated by set rules or customs in which an individual or team competes against another or others. No disrespect intended to you, but that was Doug's comment there. How would you reply to that?
Well, obviously Doug has got his opinion, and he sounds like he's researched this very well. On certain of those topics, I agree. But in other ways, I don't. I mean, I think for all major sports, whether it's baseball, basketball, any kind of an athletic sport where you need a lot of endurance, soccer or what have you, all those guys are in great physical shape. Now, granted, there are some bowlers in good shape, but there's a lot of bowlers who are really not in good shape at all. And I'm not going to name names, but I think their bowlers maybe know who they are. They're just not in great shape. They can bowl, but they don't, to me, they don't look like an athlete, and I think athletes play sports. Now, and I know people want this to be a sport because that adds credibility, but there's got to be certain reasons why this game or sport of bowling can't seem to get in the Olympics. And I'm not saying that they actually feel that badminton is more of a sport than bowling, and that's kind of sad, or curling, or something like that. So that makes me wonder. I mean, there's just all different ways of looking at it, and most people would probably they want this to be a sport. And like I said, at times I feel it's a sport, but a lot of times to me, it's kind of a game. So I can't, you can bring up a lot of statistics and this and that, but I don't know. I just look at it the way I look at it, and that's pretty much it.
Well, definitely some good points there on both ends. We had a couple other comments. Kerry Duncan writes in, if it takes a physical ability, it's a sport. If badminton and synchronized swimming are Olympic sports, then how is bowling not, or isn't, obviously?
And that's my point. So they're saying if it takes a physical activity, what did he say? A physical activity?
Physical ability.
If it takes physical ability, that makes it then it needs to be a sport.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
It's kind of an interesting stance. Jesse Lethart says bowling's a sport for sure. I could play Monopoly, Spades, or even 7-card stud for 3 hours and not hurt in every joint, muscle, or other deteriorating part of my body. Ball weighs about 10% of my weight, and you don't throw it 3 or 4 rounds like shot put, but a bunch of times, a ton in tournaments. Chess is a sport, isn't it? That's a joke. Chess boards are sold in the game department. Bowling balls used to be sold in sporting goods and aired on the wide world of sports. So, I think the big argument here, as you said, because it is a physical game, so to speak, that it should be recognized as a sport. That seems to be the argument by the readers here, at least.
Well, if people would recognize it as a sport, then it would have a lot more credibility, and more people would probably more parents would push their children in that direction and want them to become professional bowlers. But boy, I really don't see that happening anytime soon. I mean, these are just all the things I don't see happening. I see parents putting their kids in learning how to play tennis or other sports, but I don't see them doing it with the bowling. So, I mean, it's just not. Maybe if it was a lot more lucrative, maybe people would look at it more as a sport. Maybe if you had people out there making millions and millions of dollars, maybe that would help. I don't know. Maybe it's a money issue. Maybe it's not. It's hard to say.
One of our responses, too, and this was looking at it, is we talked about being out of shape, and, you mentioned the comment, and I love it, the donut comment from last week.
Sure.
Is recreational bowling the reason that bowling has a sports stigma? And the question that I asked was, why doesn't other sports? We had one comment from Dave Sanders who said that all sports have recreational tags also. Pick up basketball, golfing with buddies, what's the difference?
Okay.
I don't know. I wonder why our recreational version of the sport seems to have that stigma while others don't. Because
it's pretty much it was, looked at as a beer drinking thing, a social gathering in a smoky bowling center. It has a lot of bad stigmas to it. Now, granted, they have gone way out of their way to try to change this and try to get away from that. But, all you got to do is look at a movie like Kingpin, for example. Now, granted, that was made a few years ago, but look at all the way how they made such a joke out of everything. I mean, that's exactly the way Hollywood or the movie industry. That's exactly how they treated it. They didn't give it any respect. It was a comedy as in a joke. Now, granted, they've taken other movies and sports movies and made them, comedies and made them funny. But they've also made some of them very serious. I guess maybe when they make that serious movie about the professional bowler, then maybe that'll add some. Then people will look at it as a sport. But I don't see that. The stereotyping part of it is exactly what it is. I mean, nobody can deny that. And hopefully it'll go away and get better. Hopefully.
That's really interesting you bring that up, too, because, it does seem like the majority of the movies that revolve around bowling in some way do seem to be comedies. I remember the only one that I could think of that really wasn't was Dreamer. I remember that had Dick Weber in it, which was the 70s. But other than that, Kingpin was a comedy. That movie Greedy with Michael J. Fox had a comedy comedy undertone. So
I'm just saying, I mean, that is just the way it is, and that's okay. It's got its place. And they've made comedies out of basketball. They've made comedies out of football. Heck, they've made comments out of a lot of sports. So there's that side of the argument. All I'm saying is the debate. A lot of people will look at this as a sport, and that's fine. And like I said, if you go to like a training center, if you go to, let's say, Kegel, or if you go to the United States Bowling Congress Training Center in Arlington, well, when you go there to train, you would definitely look at that as a sport because you're there to train as a sport. So, I mean, it just depends on how you want to attack it, how you look at it. If you bowl for Team USA, well, of course, that's a sport in that regard because they train that way for it. But if you're just going to bowl league 3 games a week and you're drinking beer and having a good time with your friends, and the guy, and I don't think that they look at it as a sport. So it's got this, you could call it, with the sports/recreation. I think they just get too close. They get interwoven amongst each other, and it just becomes too close at times. If you want to treat it the way it's supposed to be treated, well, then treat it like the way they do when they go to these training camps and they learn. I mean, there's a lot of people talk about it, and those places are fantastic, and they treat it the right way. But so far, I don't think the country's behind it. I don't think there's a big push for Team USA bowling in the Olympics. It's just not a big thing. I don't know. It's just not big enough for me to make a big enough impression.
That's another challenge to our listeners. I mean, how do we promote this to make it an Olympic sport?
Exactly.
We would love, I would love to see their comments. Maybe there's something that we're not seeing.
Well, I mean, let's put this on the other side. Maybe if enough people cared about it to want to make it a sport, then maybe everyone, then it would be easy to talk about it as a sport. But that's not the way most people take it. They take it as a recreation. They take it as a cool place to go, a fun thing to do. They don't look at it as a sport. They don't train. I think I had mentioned, maybe I did or didn't, I had the chance to work a little bit for with the South Korean national team. And just as a consultant, they asked me they were asking me some questions, and I answered it. And they literally train every day over there. When you bowl for the team, that's your job. That's what they pay you to do. You live in a dorm. You get up every day. You go through your workouts, your calisthenics, your training. You train to be on a team, and they treat it as a sport. Nothing. That's what it is because there is nothing else. That's what you're doing. Well, that's got a whole different feel to it than over here, It's just different over here. Certain groups over here treat it that way, but the vast majority do not. That's why there's only, if you take professional bowlers and their percentage is so small in the big scale of people who bowl, it's ridiculous. It's not even, you can't even, it's microscopic.
It's interesting, too, we're looking at, obviously, making the sport legitimate and whatnot, and something that's making news right now happens to be this professional wrestler that has called out professional bowling. Now, is this something that bowling needs? I mean, we have Vin Gerard, this professional wrestler from Shikara, independent wrestling promotion, calling out professional bowlers. We've had Jason Belmonte, Sean Rash respond to him. And, my question to you, Eric, I mean, is this what bowling really needs? I mean, personally, I think it's good publicity to have a recognition of some sort from another quote-unquote sport, if you will. But, if you want to call it that, of course. But at the same time, does this fall into the same category that it makes bowling look like a joke because now we're getting involved with professional wrestling?
Well, obviously, this guy's just looking for a PR. He's just looking for a little push. I mean, he's just trying to make a joke. Get himself some more PR. I mean, who knows? Who knows? Maybe the PBA put him up to it. I mean, I don't know. It's just trying to find another way to. I mean, they had last year. It was either last year or the year before at the World Series of Bowling. They had the guy who worked for Howard Stern. Mm-hmm. They had him. Howard Stern talked about it on his, I think it's Sirius radio show. And, you thought maybe Howard Stern would show up or they would do some kind of a thing there. And as far as I know, they didn't do much. I mean, they hyped it up, and he's a decent bowler from back east. I mean, I think he averaged 180 for the whole thing, which is about right. That's about where he would fit. But they hyped that up pretty good. They talked about it on the PBA website. And, it's just a little bit of a PR push. But honestly, I don't think it's that big a deal, just like this isn't that big a deal. I mean, you probably get a little more punch. I mean, every time they had the thing with, I think Jim Rome, every time he gets a chance, he just bashes bowling for forever. He definitely doesn't consider this a sport. It's so bad he don't even talk about it. I think the one time was it Michael Wilbon in, was that West Malott? They had a thing a few years ago. I mean, at least it got mentioned on their show, so that was kind of cool. But as far as I know, Jim Rome, he totally thinks this is a joke, making fun of. I think he was making fun of Pete Weber at the time when he was going through his whole act and all this and that. I mean, they probably look at it They probably look at it like it's wrestling. And like I said, a lot of those guys are great athletes. Now, the outcome is pretty much given for the matches, but those guys are athletes. I mean, just look at them. I mean, most of them, I should say, some of them don't look like athletes, but about 90% of them are chiseled, and they're in fantastic shape. They're all weightlifters or what have you. You'd have to call them an athlete, I guess, wouldn't you?
I consider them very much so athletes. It's live ballet, if you will.
Yeah, it's a theater, it's a show. Like I said, this guy. The only thing I can bring this up with wrestling is many years ago when I was out on tour, we had a group that represented us. I think they were called the Marquee Group, and they were around it's either 99 or 2000 or right around that time. And I remember we had a meeting, and they talked about what needs to be done to help promote professional bowling and get more notoriety. And I remember sitting in this room, and they were asking the players, and I had my hand up, and I said, well, how does professional wrestling do this? How are they so popular? And the guy looked at me and said, it's just a fad, and it won't be around that much longer. They're just hot right now, but it's basically a fad. Well, that was 12 years ago, and I wish I was this fad. I wish I could be as powerful and strong as that fad is, because I'll tell you what, it is an unbelievable situation how big that thing is. Worldwide World Wrestling Entertainment. They call it entertainment because that's what it is. It's entertaining. But I mean, I'm just saying that was the guy couldn't quite answer it because he said, "Hey, it's just a fad. It's not going to be around much longer. They've got a good time right now." Well, here we are 12, 13 years later, and they're bigger than ever. They're bigger than ever. I don't have to tell you, they're just humongous. Whether you like it or not, and most people like it. All different age groups. They love it. Why do they like it so much? Because it's the theater that they create. They create great drama, great theater, and they're athletic, and they do things that nobody can really do at home. Well, bowling, you see people bowling all the time, and then you see people on TV, oh, I can do that. So there's a thing there, and I don't quite know what it is, but I think this guy is just trying to find just trying to get hyped and trying to get some PR. Hopefully maybe somebody will get challenged, maybe somebody from the PBA, like you said, challenge him. Maybe he can get on ESPN. All that does is create more push and more hype for him. That's all.
Well, I just hope it does end up being positive for the world of bowling as well, of course. It's weird. You touch base on a lot of these sportscasters and whatnot not taking bowling legitimate. I remember, like when Kelly Kulick won the Tournament of Champions, and of course, you would think that for women's sports that would have been a huge deal, and it was to some extent, but it was actually glossed over by a lot of these guys too because of the stigma surrounding bowling. I wish there was some way to get by that.
Well, of course. So, I mean, in the in the bowling community, when Kelly Kulick won the Tournament of Champions, it was unbelievably great news. But in the worldwide thing of sports, it was okay. It was a quick little shot, but it's not like you had all these sponsors come on board and want to start off this great and go put together a women's tour again, even though Paula Vidal is doing a fantastic job getting something going for the women, which is good to see. But overall, it didn't create this big thing that they thought it would have, and you think it should have. At least I didn't see that. It was a cool thing, but it's not like I don't see it. They have women's basketball, and you can watch those games on TV. You can't watch women bowling on TV. You can watch it on the computer when they run some of those shows. They do the live broadcast or on the internet, but you don't see nothing on television. And a lot of the women bowlers are fantastic. I mean, they're really good, but there's no interest anymore. The right sponsors are just not involved. The right people are not involved. Like I said, Paula's doing a great job. She seems to be trying to she'd be a great person to have on the show, by the way, to get her perspective on this, because she's really banging the drum to get women's bowling back into the limelight once again.
I'd love to have her on, and I think the key there, too, is the passion involved in it. You know, that's something I think is missing from a lot of people.
Well, she's very, like I said, I've known her for a lot of years, and she's very good with that, and she's pushing hard. And like I said, if anybody can bring back women's bowling to the forefront, she can. She just has to get the right dollars and cents behind her. And who knows? They may wind up with something special pretty soon, because there's a lot of really good collegiate women bowlers. And it would be nice to give them something to look forward to when they're done, as opposed to bowling PTQs on the men's tour or stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. It'd be nice to have it like it used to be with the LPBT, and actually having a senior tour and a men's tour and a women's tour again. That would be spectacular.
You would think at that point, that would be a place to get to once again. But the fact that they're so far away from that, it's not a very good feeling. It doesn't make it sound like bowling is on the upward push. It sounds like it's on the downward push. That's why it's going to take some creative minds and a little bit of luck along the way to put this thing in a different direction. But I don't know. It's been sinking for a bunch of years. It's been taking on water. I don't know how you're going to pump the water out and get it going the right direction again. I don't know.
Well, hopefully they do figure it out, and I wish them the best. Of course, I'm sure you do as well.
Absolutely.
Trying to throw out some feelers on what you guys want to hear, what you want to discuss here on the show, of course, and we've continuously got some comments. And again, I want to say thank you very much to everyone that has put in the time to email us or post on the Facebook page. One question that we asked on Friday was, do left-handed bowlers have an advantage in the modern game? Of course, this stems from one of the many stigmas surrounding bowling. Eric, I'm sure you've heard it all your life.
No, I've never heard it once. Boy, that's something new. Wow, I didn't know they had that. Let's discuss it.
And, we had a few people respond. One gentleman, Chris Warren, said absolutely. Another one, Judas Schaefer-Wooler, said, to me, that's a myth. Tom Jankovic brings up a very interesting point here, going the opposite way, saying they're actually disadvantaged in the modern team bowling game. If you're the only lefty on a pair with five-person team, by the time the set is over, the left side is only broken down as much as the right side was in the middle of the fourth frame of the first game. You don't get a properly broken down, high-scoring shot. Sheldon Shapiro looks at it from the other side of the spectrum, saying that you get to keep the shot longer, so that actually puts it at the advantage. Eric, as a premier left-handed bowler, what do you think?
Well, I've seen both sides of it. I think if it's there from the get-go, like when you first start, obviously it's going to stick around a little longer. But if it's not there at all, then it's going to take forever to get there, and by that time you may be already done. Look, there's disadvantages and advantages in all sports or games. Okay, so there's going to be times where the really good left-handed bowlers, and I say really good because whether you're a right-handed bowler or a left-handed bowler, it's the ones you see on TV are the ones that get the most notoriety. They're very good. They're not really good because of what hand they throw with it. They're very good because they just are. They're great players because they're just great, not because of what hand they use. And I think that is the most important thing. In other words, if Walter Ray was left-handed or if Parker Bowen was right-handed, they would both still be great. Or Norm Duke was left-handed or whatever. When you're good, you're really good, okay? They just happen to throw on that side of the lane. Like I said, if they make the lanes a certain way and the condition is nice on both sides to start with, and you have fewer left-handed bowlers in the tournament, of course the left side's got a better chance of holding up longer. But there's so many variables. There's topography. There's the type of pattern. There's the type of balls that people are using. There's so many different variables. Like with the team bowling you mentioned, well, if you're the only lefty on the pair and everybody else is right-handed, well, yeah, they could carve a shot on the right, and they'll bomb them. They'll start bombing them. Well, what if you're the only lefty on the pair and the right side is not that good, let's say, or they get squirrely, and you've got a good look? Well, you'll have it the whole time. So I guess there's your advantage. But heck, you still got to be good enough to take advantage of the advantage. That's why they used to always talk about, when I was out on tour, maybe the finals, and the lefties are in the finals, and I would always say, but these are great bowlers. They're all Hall of Fame material type players, whether they're left-handed or right-handed. So why wouldn't they bowl? Why wouldn't they bowl well when they have a chance? Because all you want is a chance. And normally, especially out on the Pro Tour, the left-handers who are out there, the last couple of years, overall, if you look at the numbers, they've been at a big disadvantage. I mean, you look at they haven't been really nowhere near the top of the money in the last 3, 4, even 5 years. I mean, they might win a tournament here and there, but they're really not. All you got to do is go look at money lists, and you can see they haven't been. It hasn't been very strong out there for a long time. And even when it was strong, which I happen to be a part of, you had some unbelievably talented left-handed players: Parker Bohm, Mike Albee, Jason Couch, Ricky Ward. I mean, Jess Stayrook. I mean, the list goes. Rich Wolf, my old roommate. I mean, the talent level was through the ceiling. I'm sure I missed a few, and if I have, I'm sorry. The point I'm saying is the talent level was high. The left-handers who stuck around the longest out on tour and bowled for all those years, they were exceptional. There was a lot of average or everyday bowler would come out there and try to play, and they had nothing, no matter what hand they threw it with, and they'd go home. It's the ones who were out there for a lot of years and stuck around. They were very, very good. And that's the same on the right. But you hear about it more on the left because of being the minority. That's why. That's all there is to it.
Did you have anyone approach you? I mean, like stories in your career, someone actually approached you and said you were only good because you were a left-hander?
Almost all the time. For the most, especially. I mean, it was unbelievable. Gives me a story. I can remember bowling a Pro-Am in Indianapolis back in the late 90s. And at that time, we bowled junior Pro-Ams. And I remember coming on the pair with this one kid, and that was the first thing he said to me. He says, how does it, he says, they announced my name, and then we go back, you shake everybody's hand, and he says, yeah, you got a bunch of titles. He says, but you're left-handed. It's a lot easier, isn't it? Now, this kid was probably 10, 11, 12 years old. So, and he was a pretty decent bowler for his age, but I was like sitting there like, why are you saying this? You're just a kid. But you could see where he's been getting this from, whether it was his parents or his buddies. I mean, the stigma was already being drilled into his head, and he was just a young little kid. So as he gets older, where do you think that's going to go? It's only going to get worse. It's just the way. Look, this has been around since the 60s. I mean, it's been around for 50 years, and it ain't going away. It's not going to go away. It's just not. I mean, that's just the way it is. If you're going to do this and you happen to be left-handed, you have got to accept it. There's certain ones they respect highly. They just respect them for how good they are. But I've talked to a lot of top right-handed players, and in their mind, there's just not a lot of respect coming on the left. They just don't respect them. They don't respect us, and that's okay. I mean, hey, Rodney Dangerfield, nobody don't get no respect. I mean, you when you do this and if you're right-handed, if you do it long enough, you're gonna hear all the comments just as well. So it is what it is. It's part of the game. It's part of the mystique of the game.
Let me ask you this too, kind of staying with the same topic. Besides yourself, of course, I mean, who, as a left-handed bowler, who did you respect out on tour a lot? I mean, who would you consider your top left-handed bowlers of all time?
Well, you got to remember, I started out there in the early '90s. When I first went out on tour, obviously Parker was the premier. Not only a great player, but he was just a good friend. And I tried to learn from him. Another good buddy of mine, John Mazza, who I forgot about earlier. I roomed with him for a while. Of course, that was a treat. But I mean, I learned a lot from him. Now there's so many. Mike Albee, of course, the ultimate respect for Mike. Probably the classiest guy ever out on tour, whether he's left or right-handed. It doesn't matter. Just a very, very classy person. I'll tell you how classy Mike was. He was one of the few pros, if not the only pro, that after we would go to a stop and we would bowl, he would write a letter to the proprietor thanking them for having us. And he did this every week. He would send a letter to the proprietor. And I don't know how many other players ever did that. I think I might have done that once, but he did it like every week to show his gratitude for the proprietor having us there. I mean, he was just that kind of person. And I mean, he was a tiger on the lanes, but he was probably the nicest guy you'd ever meet. And much people respected him. And I think a lot of right-handers and they all respected him, and I think that was a lot of the reason, because of the way he carried himself. So, you've got Parker, you got Albee. I mean, there's just those are some of the best. I mean,
I'm sure Earl Anthony makes that list too, right?
Of course. I mean,
yeah.
I'm talking about the time when I was out there. Earl was already gone by then, meaning he wasn't even partaking anymore. I think he was maybe bowling a little bit of the senior tour. And I was fortunate enough to talk to him a few times, and Earl was great. I mean, he was just unbelievably knowledgeable, of course. But just the guys, and of course Petraglia. There's another one. I mean, the names are, there's some unbelievably talented, great left-handed bowlers who bowled out there, just like there's some unbelievably great, talented right-handed bowlers who've been out there. But there's more right-handers than left-handers, so, the left-handers, they stick out more. That's just the way it is. But, the debate will rage on and on and on. I mean, but that's what I remember, especially back then.
Should I ask you about the John Mazza, why it was a treat to room with him?
I never got any sleep. All we did was talk about bowling, morning, noon, and night. Talk about what ball he was going to lay out. I mean, he was a drillaholic. I mean, besides him and myself, we kept Larry Lickstein, the guy who ran the player service at that time, we kept him in business. And if you ever listen to this Litch, you know what I mean. Mazza was like one of your greatest customers, and I was right behind him. We drill 4 or 5 balls a week, and every time you drill 4 or 5 balls, you get the truck makes money because you get in the habit of drilling a lot of balls because you think it's going to help and having that fresh surface and finding the right layout. And I would stay up late at night talking to John about this, and John was a workaholic. John worked hard on his game. Went and saw a lot of coaches. I believe before he quit, Freddie Borden was his main coach, another great coach. John was a workaholic. He worked hard, a lot of dedication, and he won 8 or 9 times. I mean, definitely Hall of Fame material. Mazza was great. Back in his day, he was fantastic.
Well, that's going to bring us into our Q&A segment, and it's great we were talking about drilling stuff in the truck because that kind of goes into our first question. Once again, if you guys have any questions, comments, ideas, or you want to go pick that fight with Eric, please send us your emails in to bowlingevolved@gmail.com or visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/bowlingevolved. Our first email came from a young bowler, a junior bowler, as a matter of fact, from right here in my hometown, Laughlin, Nevada. So big shout out to them.
Cool.
This comes from Tyler Hughes. Tyler writes in, he says, guys, I just want to say thank you very much for doing the show. I'm very excited about listening to this. What I wanted to ask was, what can you tell me about ball rotation? I want to know what's better, side rotation or forward roll. What's the difference between the two, and which should I use in my game?
Well, here's the deal. The more side rotation you put on the ball, when that ball contacts friction, it's going to make more of a hook or a turn. In other words, if you're right-handed, the ball is going to make more of a left-hand turn, and if you're left-handed, it's going to make more of a sharper right-hand turn. Because that's when the ball's rotating on its side with a lot of axis rotation, when it contacts friction, the ball's going to jump or take a sharp break. Some bowlers like that kind of motion, but I have found that that's a very difficult motion to control. And the idea is to have power with control. So if you have that kind of a release, you're going to lose control. You'll have some power, but you're going to lose control. You look at the guys who throw the ball with 2 hands and they really rev the ball up quite a bit. You don't see a lot of side rotation. You see a lot of forward rotation. There's a lot of revolutions, but the ball's traveling in a forward motion. I think forward rotation gives you better control, and the ball cuts through the oil actually better because it's rolling. The more the ball rolls, the more surface of the ball is on the lane. The more side rotation, and technically there's less surface of the ball on the lane, but you get that snap, kind of a snap motion at the pocket or going towards the head pin, really challenging to control. So I would recommend, like I do with most of my students, to stay behind the ball and get some good heavy roll on the ball. There's an adage that says straighter is always greater. Well, and a lot of times straighter is better. The trick is to be straight with some revs on the ball. Rotation, get some nice heavy forward roll or some good rotation. Nowadays you see a lot of 3/4 roll. It's not really spinning the ball, but it's not really forward roll. It's kind of in between. That's still a good roll. But you watch a lot of players, they're coming up the back of the ball somewhat. They're lifting or rotating their hand up to the back of the ball, which creates a lot of forward roll. And I just think it's much easier to control, and it gives you a better read of the condition, especially on the challenging sport conditions. Oh, sport conditions, that means this game is a sport. See, I'm wrong. But what I'm saying is on the sport conditions, that kind of roll seems to be more beneficial. You want all that side rotation much harder to control. Hey, it's exciting when the ball comes off. It really takes a jump, and if you hit the pocket, you're going to explode the pins. But for my money, a little bit more forward roll or a little less heavy rotation on the side of the ball is actually, I think, better.
Well, that's going to go into our second question of the evening, which this is definitely one I think you're going to have a field day with because it's a very loaded question in a lot of ways. This comes from Tommy Taylor out of Mesa, Arizona. Tommy writes, guys, I'm doing good. I got my bowling average to about 200 right now, and I'm trying to get my average as high as I can. I want to start bowling for money. What's the best way to become a pro bowler?
Well, have your head examined? No. No, that's just kidding. No, well, you know, it's kind of cool or it's kind of nice to know that somebody actually would like to become still a professional bowler, considering it's been on the decline for a bunch of years now. I mean, it's great to hear that people still want to become a professional bowler. But, you know, if you average 200 on a recreational house shot, realistically, on a pro tour or a pro environment, that's about 170 average. Because if you were to bowl like the PBA leagues where they put up all the PBA shots, those lanes are very challenging. Guys could average 230, even 240 on a house shot league, but they go bowl that, they may average 2-0, maybe even 2-1, maybe 190, 2-0. I mean, and those are good bowlers. So you got to subtract 30, 40 pins. That's why when people bowl let's say the U.S. Open, and the pros average 210, 215, maybe 220. Most of the amateurs average 170, 180. They're 30, 40, 50 pins behind because the pattern is very flat. Whether it's 1-1 or 2-1, it's extremely flat. And the flatter the lane, the more challenging it is and the more of a shot maker you have to become. So if you're averaging 170, 180 in the league on a normal house shot, then you're looking to become a professional, you've got a long ways to go. I mean, if you get yourself a great coach or get a good coach, put a lot of games in, put a lot of heart, a lot of dedication, you can get there. But boy, the criteria would be if you say I'm averaging 200 or 2-0 in a sport league or on a sports condition or a PBA league, then I would say you're probably 230, 235. You have to look at it that way without offending anybody's ego. That's just the way it is. This game, if you're bowling on a recreational condition, as you know for sure because you're a good player, the scores are tremendous. But if you take that same environment and put a flat lane condition out there, meaning 1-1, 2-1, and all of a sudden your scores will go out the window because when you miss a little right, if you're right-handed, it's not going to come back. And if you help it a little bit, it's not going to hold. Well, if you don't have swing and you don't have hold, now you've got a very challenging environment. And to me, you're going to average 160, 170. So I would say whoever wants to get into this and try to make a living out of throwing a bowling ball, you've got to really start from the bottom and work your way up. They've got PBA shots. They got the PBA regional program. You know, go out and make and do well in that environment. See, you can test yourself there before you would even consider going out to the pro tour. I mean, you might as well just go jump in the deep end. I would try to get through the shallow end first before I would jump in the deep end. But some people like to jump in the deep end, so it's up to them.
I was going to say, I'm not even ashamed to admit my very first regional experience. I think I averaged about $1.80, I think, for my first regional tournament. You know, never experiencing that kind of environment before, but I learned. You know, you learn from going out there and doing.
Absolutely.
So.
And all those guys who have become good players out on the pro tour, very, very few of them went out there and were fantastic. They all had to go through the what's the word I'm trying to think? They all had to go through the early stages. They all had to get some acclimated out there and go through you had to go around a couple of times. Sometimes it took guys a bunch of years to get going. Then once they got going, they were fantastic. Every now and then, talent would come out there back in the day that they were so good it didn't matter. But they still had to get acclimated to bowling out there, the travel, the conditions. It's a completely different world. It just is. And it still is. There's nothing like it.
Well, do you remember your very first PBA tournament?
I try to forget. I can remember I can remember my first ever professional tournament was a regional, and it was in Las Vegas, and it was back in the 80s, and when they had 400 entries. I think they had 420 entries at the Showboat, and I cashed like 126th place, and I was excited because I cashed in a pro tournament. It was a big regional, but it was like, they had so many bowlers, and there was three regions involved, 3 different organizations, and that was a long time ago, but I do remember that. But after that, my God, it took me a long time. Let's put it this way. I joined the PBA in 81. I didn't win my first regional title until 1986. It took me almost 6 years to win. I had made some finals, but I could never get over the hump to win, So I paid my dues. I went through the regional ranks, and I learned to become a good bowler in that environment. This is way before even thinking about the Pro Tour. So I really worked my way up through the ranks. I did it the hard way, but that's what got me to where I needed to be. But once you win once, well, then winning becomes a habit, just like losing can become a habit for people. You see people, they just seem to always find a way to lose. Well, once you start winning, then you find ways of winning.
Well, hopefully Tommy takes that advice, and I hope that actually everyone takes that into consideration. I would definitely say follow your dream, though. If you want to be a PBA player, take Eric's advice. Do what you got to do it. Go out there and make yourself something.
Like anything else. If that's your dream, hey, we only live once. You take your shot at it. Don't let people not make you want to do it, or listen. If that's what you want to do, but do it the right way. Just don't, a lot of hard work and dedication. You just can't show up and expect it all to be there. And that's why I said get yourself a great coach, or get a really good coach, and put the time and the effort. And it's going to take a little bit of money, of course. Equipment costs money and everything else, and practice costs money. But a lot of people bowl. There's a lot of people who can actually bowl, but it's tough to be a bowler. There is a difference between people who bowl and people who are bowlers. Bowlers are, they're a special breed. And to get exceptionally good at this game, they're a very small percentage. A lot of people bowl, but there's a very, very small percentage who get very, very good at this game, good enough to make a living at it, especially nowadays when it's so hard to, because there's just not a lot of money like there used to be. And not that there was tons before, but it just seems a lot less now.
Any parting thoughts for our listeners before we end this out?
Well, I think we've had a great topic to talk about, and like I said, I know we just touched on it, and there's so many different ways you can look at this and discuss it, and there's a lot of people out there who can really have their opinion on this thing, because if you were to speak to someone, again, like an Amuleto Monticelli, I saw Amuleto a few months ago here in Vegas, and he has kind of inspired me, believe it or not, because he's like 50 or 51 years old, and he is in better shape than most 20-year-olds. Now, granted, he's been staying in shape for his whole life. That long as I've known him, he's been a big workout guy, and he's in great shape, but he throws the ball as good now as he ever has. So that just shows that you can get yourself, if you've got the talent and the ability, you can, even as you get older, compete in this game. Again, you don't see a lot of guys in their late 40s or even early 50s maybe trying to compete for a player of the year. In bowling, that's very possible, which, again, might be another reason why it would be hard to maybe call it a sport, because it named me one other sport that you could see, like in football, basketball, or baseball, where you got guys in their late 40s actually being named like a player of the year. Most of those guys they're younger because they're athletic. So in bowling, you can definitely last longer. So maybe that's why you don't have to be. That's where the athleticism maybe is not as important. But then again, when you look at somebody like, say, an Amuleto, He's in fantastic shape, and that's all he believes in is training, training, training. So he actually trains to bowl. He doesn't just show up. But there's certain guys who take it that way. So I guess it just depends on what you want to do with this game or sport. I think it's most people look at it as a game, but there are those who really can feel that it's a sport, and in that way, it is a sport. So maybe it's it's both. It's a game/sport or a sport/game. It just depends on how you want to look at it.
Well, guys, you have the challenge laid down again. If you guys think it's a sport, continue to post on our page. You think it's a game, continue to post. We love reading your comments. I know the left-handed controversy, so to speak, is always going to be there as long.
It'll never go away. Never.
Yeah. As long as bowling's going to be there. And, if you guys have any questions, as I said, I've mentioned this a few times, please write in. We love hearing what you have to say. So far, we've had definitely a very surprising and in a good way following thus far for our first show. We hope you've enjoyed the second show as much. Again, you can write to us at bowlingevolved@gmail.com or, of course, facebook.com/bowlingevolved. We're here to do what we can and, try to make this game make a little more sense for everybody.
Well, trying to make it make sense is challenging because a lot of times it never makes sense. But that's why when you throw a round object at 10 round objects, anything can happen. My good friend used to tell me that all the time, Len Nicholson. He used to always say, when I used to ask him questions in the region, because he was the lane guy and he was in charge of the region, and I'd always ask him these questions, and he would say, Eric, when you take a round ball and throw it at 10 round objects, anything's possible. And but he told me that a long time ago, and it's true. As you know, you can make the perfect shots and not strike. And again, you could throw it anywhere and they could all go down. So that's what makes the game interesting for everybody, or, the sport interesting for everybody. And that's why we're doing this, hopefully to generate some interest from people. And all your letters and comments, whether they're good or bad, bring it on, because I'm ready.
Well, and I don't know about you, Eric, but whenever I throw perfect shots, they always strike. It's just how I roll. But
if you're Dustin Markowitz, that's when you throw it perfect, you strike. See, I'm there at Forkel. When I throw it perfect, I leave a solid 9. That's just the way. Or maybe I get the 5. Well, I'm just happy to get the 5 out these days anyway. So you know how it is.
Well, the problem is, though, is that I only throw the perfect shot like once every 10 or 11 games or so. That's my issue. So, yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, the idea is to do it many times in a row. It's a kind of it's a repetition of madness. It's like, it's like being insane. It's just a repetition of madness. You're just continuing to do the same thing over and over.
Of course, the one line that I always remember, Albert Einstein, insanity, the definition of it is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome.
Well, people said that this game can drive you crazy, and now you can see how.
Well, bowling fans, once again, I want to say thank you very much for joining us tonight. That's going to take us to the end of the show. Again, I want to say, from the bottom of my heart, please continue supporting us and ask any and all questions and comments on our Facebook page, or, of course, email us at bowlingevolved@gmail.com. I've been Dustin J. Markowitz, joined, as always, by my co-host, Eric Forkel. Eric?
Dustin, what a great show. Looking forward to the next one.
Fantastic, and I look forward to it as well. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks again, and have a great night.
Good night.